One of the things that is I have this favorite saying, which is not my saying, but I adopted it, is never waste a crisis. And I really truly believe it, that there is an opportunity when you go into rough waters, when there is turbulence, when it's uncertain times, it does create a unique opportunity for creativity.
Welcome to CEO, the podcast that celebrates women who are leading with impact and redefining success. I'm your host, Sophie, and each week we'll bring you powerful stories and practical insights to empower and fuel your own leadership journey. Maria Latushkin joined me today. She is a technology and product expert who has spent over 20 years leading product, engineering, and operations teams, transforming technology for global brands including Walmart, Peet's Coffee, and most recently Albertsons. As a Group Vice President, Technology and Engineering, Maria is responsible for all aspects of technology for retail and supply chain, thinking through the future of retail technology and spearheading digital transformation for supply chain space. Prior to her current role, Maria held CTO roles at various consumer technology companies in consumer and healthcare space, including Omada Health, One Kings Lane, and led technology and product teams at Peet's Coffee and Walmart.com. In this episode, we dived into how a crisis can create an opportunity, taking risks, and how to create a safe space for people to fail. I hope this is as insightful for you as it was for me. Hi, Maria. Welcome to the podcast today. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm actually very excited about our conversation.
So I want to dive straight in. I'd love to get a little bit of an understanding around yourself and your background and really how you got to the position you're in today.
Awesome. Yeah, I had I guess I want to say a meandering career, but I do deeply believe that it was destined to be to bring me where I am. I started out in tech and I've always been around tech in various roles. And somewhere along the line, I just started getting into more and more leadership roles and then moved industries. I've been in consumer, I've been in healthcare. Now I am working at Albertsons. And so I believe that in terms of getting to where I am, maybe the biggest thing that kind of navigated me was I'm a problem solver by nature, and one could say a glutton for punishment. And so I kept picking up different problems, and really my motto has always been leave it better than what it was when you found it. And in this, you start smaller, in a smallish way, and then you fix something or you find a different way to look at something to address it. And then you get bigger and you get bigger and you get bigger. And eventually that kind of gets you into solving larger and larger problems or making a larger and larger impact. I guess a couple of things that I'd say served me well in this, and it actually may not be obvious. One is just because it's not my problem or I didn't create it doesn't mean that I shouldn't solve it. And so that would actually lead me to pick up things that just felt like they would make an impact or they needed to be addressed, right? And the other piece is that you actually don't to lead, you don't need to have things within the sphere of your control. And when you see a problem that's like a large enough problem, an interesting enough problem for people to focus on, they'll rally. It doesn't, they'll find time and you'll be able to get people around you. And all of a sudden you have a following of sorts, right? And then you're able to make together, you're able to make an impact.
I like what you said there around it doesn't have to be your problem to solve. I think that is pretty much leadership because half the time it's not your problem, but you just have to go and solve it and fix it. And so that's a good way to think of it.
Yeah. And then, if, once you think about also the leaders, the aspiring leaders, oftentimes people don't feel, even the ones that want to be proactive, they don't feel that they have the permission to solve something. They don't have the permission to address it. And I would say just go and do it and ask for forgiveness later. And that's, being proactive, seeing something, having an idea of how to address it and being proactive about addressing it. I'd say these are really important markers of leadership at any level, really.
And to get a little bit more of an understanding around the scale that you're working at now, just to give everyone a little bit of an understanding of what you're currently doing and how much you are overseeing at the moment, can you dive into that a little bit?
Okay. So in my current role, I lead retail and supply chain at Albertsons, and we are a pretty large organization. We're global organizations with teams in different parts, different parts of the country and in different countries. And in my role, I look after all things technology that power our stores, that power manufacturing, that power all of the aspects of supply chain.
So you've obviously been responsible for very large global teams. What do you think is key to managing large organizations?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So, as somebody who's been in leading both like small growing teams and large global teams, I do find that not everybody makes this transition smoothly. And there's some things that might be really obvious on the surface, but I see either stumble and like not do it right. And the things, if I had to pick a couple of things, I'd say the most impactful ones are one is communication and over communication. When you have a smaller team, if you can get everybody in the room and you say something and everybody gets it. And if they don't get it, they'll ask you a question right there. So you know that your message, or you have a reasonable degree of confidence that your message is getting across. When you have a large, especially a large team, and especially a team with like varying skill sets, varying journeys, varying ways people process information, varying time zones, you have to be very aware that just because you said it, everybody interpreted it potentially differently. And also, somebody may not have been there, and then they would hear it from somebody else. So, figuring out a way to communicate, over communicate, and really watch for what somebody may not have internalized, what somebody may not have even heard necessarily. That is a really important part. And the other one, and these are in no particular order, is being crystal clear on your priorities and what you want people to do. That's exactly for the same reasons, right? People need to know in their daily work, and their daily work might be so different from one part of somebody was doing with one skill set versus somebody else. They have to know what the purpose is. They have to know what's important to the organization, to your team, and to you as the leader. And you have to be very clear and deliberate about how you state it. It can't be, 55 different priorities. There has to be very few of them, and they have to be very clearly stated. So I'd say these are the two most important things that I can
Yeah.
think of.
Communication, but understanding whether it's too much or too little. And then also the piece around don't have too many goals because let's face it, people can't do 101 things at once. So it's ensuring that you have
Yeah.
the same goals. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And I think a lot of people forget to bring it down to the basics. Just thinking about those two things as a leader, especially when you've got so much to do, hopefully will make your job a lot easier and make things run smoothly. Now, as a female leader, how do you navigate leading during times of uncertainty or crisis? Do you feel like you have a different way of approaching it to maybe some of your colleagues?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is I have this favorite saying, which is not my saying, but I adopted it, is never waste a crisis. And I really truly believe it, that there is an opportunity when you go into rough waters, when there is turbulence, when it's uncertain times. It does create a unique opportunity for creativity. It does create a unique opportunity for doing something different, and potentially, if you think out of the box, potentially coming up with something that otherwise, if you were in calm waters, you wouldn't have an opportunity to do. And when done right, it allows organizations to come out stronger. It can actually build careers. And so if you look at it just right, it's actually oftentimes, a gift of sorts, maybe not the gift that you wanted or asked for, but it's a gift. So I try to look at it from that perspective. And I try to make sure that people, as much as possible, again, depending on what the turbulent times are, look at it in a positive way and see how they can exercise the different muscles that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. And, maybe come up with something unique. That's one thing. And then the other one I'd say is now is a really interesting time. It's a unique time in organizations in how they operate, with all of the change that is happening, with all of the advances that technology gives us. it's almost like the old playbook is out. And the things that all of the corporate books were giving us, they don't necessarily apply anymore. And so I look at this also as a unique opportunity for a different kind of leadership, a leadership that has built in much more flexibility, much more adaptability, and much more collaboration. Because I do fundamentally believe that these would be the skills that would be crucial in kind of like this, leadership 2.0 of sorts, and what the future professional environment would need. There is, people talk a lot about the hourglass structure. And it's actually really interesting. And I fully subscribe by this notion. If you think about like traditional companies, traditional management, you'll have leadership at the top, you have your middle management, and then you have individual contributors. And in the hourglass, you can think about the middle being squished of sorts. And so the traditional middle management becomes pressed, and there's less, with all of the advances in technology, with changing the way we work, it becomes redefined of sorts. And so you still, like, the things that are really important is obviously the individual skill, as well as having really clear goals, really clear purpose and the vision, and kind of like raison d'etre. So then you have this top, you have the bottom, and kind of like the hourglass. And the reason I bring this up is I think that in a lot of ways, women are uniquely suited for this type of new leadership needs. And I think it's a great time, and it's a wonderful time, and something where we have a chance to contribute in a completely different way.
I really like, and I'm just going to go back to your first point around, crisis creates opportunity. I think if there's any, and not just inside of work, but outside of work as well, as if there's anything you're going through, any struggles, always think that this is going to either teach you something or it's going to create an opportunity for you. So you always have to be positive and have that sort of mindset to go, it's okay. This might not work out, but actually, hopefully I will be in a better place and come out of it, in a better place as well. Within, I suppose, your background and your experience, have you seen many women within technology at the forefront and leading the way?
I do. And actually, what's really heartwarming is that there's more and more of them. And when I was starting out, which was pretty a long time ago, there were very few women in the field, and even fewer of them were actually advancing. And there's, studies written as to like, why does this happen and what happens and where do they fall out of sorts. But I do, when I look at how many girls start out and they choose to go into STEM now, so that's your top of the funnel, right? And when I look at how many women actually get to top positions, I find that, I wish there would be more, right? But I find it, in terms of the trajectory, I find it very heartwarming. And the best thing I would say that I notice is it becomes almost, it's no longer an oddity, and it becomes almost the normal. And, in more and more settings that I'm at, it doesn't become about a female leader. It becomes just a leader, right? And so there's, I think the true testament to something being successful is when people don't qualify. And what I find really, really heartwarming is that it stops becoming a female leader conversation, but just a leader conversation, as there's like more and more women occupying the space. And I feel so many, as I see people coming up in their careers, one of the things that I believe is really important, and where a lot of people kind of fizzle out in leadership, is having the confidence and really the internal feeling that you belong. And I see more and more women, and like young women in the beginning of their careers, and people going further out, like actually having it, and not feeling like they have, this whole imposter syndrome, and asking for permission if they're like in the right room. They do occupy that space. They show up, they lead. And I think this is really, really great. And I hope that the trajectory continues.
And following on from that, and that was, I suppose, my next question around how would you approach, or how would you suggest for someone to approach career advancement and promotions? Because obviously you've done really well. How can someone progress upwards?
When I was a young executive, the CEO of that company, in like my introductory one-on-one, said something that on the surface sounds super obvious, but there's a lot in it. And it's one of the things that I found most helpful really in how to approaching my career and in general, like what I do is literally what he said was three things. Tell people what you're going to do, then do it, then talk about what you've done. And I remember looking at him and I was pretty young. And I was like, well, yes, of course, that's what I would do. But oftentimes we're in these like, three little phrases. What's hiding there is that you have to be very planful, strategic. You have to have a vision. In order to tell people what you're going to do, you have to have a vision. So you have to have a vision. You have to articulate it. And then, because if you do something that's even amazing, but it hasn't been declared first, it almost feels like to others that maybe it happened by luck versus you actually executing it and having a major and crucial role in it. So articulating what you're planning to do is really important. It also helps you build alliances. It helps you build that whole like following and other people that will rally with you. That increases the chances of whatever it is that you're doing being successful. And B, that also notices people, right? And when we talk about promotions, when we talk about advancements, it's really important, not as much maybe, but almost as much how people perceive what you do and who is kind of in your corner and who can advocate for you and who can also help you build your story. You don't want to be alone with your story. You want others to help you build the story. Proactively declaring what you're planning to do is very important. Then obviously execution. Anybody who just says, I will do all these things, but then doesn't do it, very quickly becomes also a narrative, but not the narrative you want to be part of, right? So being able to execute, and these are the same people that will, help you execute. That will be your posse. That will be your following. That will be your team, whether that's your actual team or a cross-functional one. And then being able to measure it, being able to really, in order to say what you've done, in order to talk about the impact, it also means that along the way, you had to have an ability to measure it and you had to have an ability to course correct. So there's a lot hiding there in terms of how we execute and what we measure and how planful we're about it. So that's it's a whole lot in there. But I'd say that when people think about what they're doing and careful about it, deliberate about it, thoughtful about it, two things happen. One, you actually start working on things that have impact. There's so many really hardworking people that seem to just not get ahead. And a lot of it sometimes is a question of, are you working on something that has impact? Are you working on something that will help you prop up your career as well? And if when you're looking at, or are you just like the responding to the influx of work that comes your direction and making space for things that will help you, that are meaningful, that are not just busy work, that will help you have this impact, is really crucial.
And I think it's not just obviously going into business, executing. Obviously, that's going to be great for your career, but also it's going to be great for you personally. You can build that confidence. The more you execute, if you say, I'm going to do this and you execute it, then you will want to talk about it and you will have that confidence, and that should hopefully drive you forward inside and outside of work. So I really like that. And I do think you have to think about what you're doing. You have to be strategic, like you said, and execute it is really important. But then a lot of people I know that have done really amazing things don't necessarily talk about it. Talk about it. If you've done these amazing things, don't be shy. Don't sit in the corner. Like, get yourself out.
And the thing is that I'm glad you said that, because sometimes I speak to people and they say, well, that just feels like shameless self-promotion. And, there's ways to talk about the things that you've achieved without being, self-serving or sounding like you're just self-promoting. It's really, if you are able, and especially if you're careful about what you measure, and how you measure it, you can just talk about the impact, right? And you can talk about how things were before and what did you do to make it better. and where they are now. And these are just facts. So it's not, self-promoting. It's not any of the things that some people may feel like they don't want to do. It's just stating the facts. And those facts would be really powerful and people would notice, your work and your impact.
Yeah, I agree with that one. And if we talk a little bit around ambition, because I think getting to where you've got to today, there's obviously been some ambition there. But how important do you think it is for women to assert their ambition and then obviously go after it as well? And what advice would you give to these women that want to be more ambitious?
And I would say the word ambition has different connotations. And I also feel that some people feel like it's a bad thing. So I'll answer it differently. It's really no different from having a vision and being bold and deliberate in executing on that vision. And I would say this is something people should be proud of. And this is something people should absolutely be vocal about. If, when you have a thought, when you have something to say, when you have an idea, and, you have to articulate it and it's almost like your duty because you're going to make something much better with your idea, with what you have to say. And then, be bold about it and be proud of it and just go after it. And I think this is the exciting stuff. So I think that people absolutely should do it.
Yeah, basically take a risk. What's the worst that's going to happen? I think I was speaking to someone else about that the other day. Yeah, have your goals and speak about your goals, and that's your ambition is building that vision for yourself.
And sometimes people say, well, what if I don't get it, or what if something doesn't happen? And I tell myself that same thing to the day, because sometimes I feel like, oh my God, I'm afraid to do this, or what if something doesn't work out? It's like the only way for something to not work out for sure is if you don't do it. And I look at it as like, look, you'll either get what you want or you'll get a new experience. Figure out how to do something differently. And you have to try. The only thing that you always have to do is you have to try.
Yeah, and sticking on this point, actually, what have you done, or what are kind of your top tips around, I suppose, keeping yourself sane or as sane as possible when things get crazy? What do you do?
Well, there's different things. I try to, there's like the physical stress and the physical being really tired, or, whenever you have pressures in life. And what I find really helpful for me personally, and everybody has a different, thing that will work for them. I love the outside. I love the outdoors, and I love walking. And so I literally, whether that's a walk around the block or a long hike, like I find these things to be really therapeutic for me. The reason I bring it up and is I think it's really important. You have your batteries, right? And you have to recharge. You can't be running on empty. And especially as a leader, you don't want to be in front of a person that's constantly stressed and about to lose it, right? So I think that in leadership, you almost have even more responsibility to take care of yourself and to manage your stress. It's really important. And you have to find the thing that's your thing, right? And it's going to be different for everybody. It's just important to figure out what works for you and what you can do regularly, because if it's something that you have to orchestrate and you may not have time to do it, you may not do it often enough. So, find your thing. I take great pleasure I'm a very curious person. And so I take great pleasure in new things, in new experiences, in figuring out what I can learn, and whether that's something that's professional or it's something in my personal life. I love learning the new things. So that for me is something that truly keeps me sane, keeps me engaged. And again, that's my thing. And for somebody else, it could be a different thing, but you have to be interested in what you're doing. You have to be interested in your kind of daily activities. One thing that I tell people is you have to make sure, and especially capable people that are good at more than one thing, is the biggest trap is to get really good at something you don't really like. Because we always have this intersection about what we're good at and, what we like to do. And so if you get good at something you don't really like, you may slide into making that your main activity. And the problem is you'll never be great at it. because to be great at something, you have to be engaged, you have to be interested, you have to have that spark. And if you don't like it, you won't get the spark. And so this is something that I tell people, because the things that you're bad at, they will kind of filter out on their own, right? But it's the things that you're actually good at you have to watch out for and make sure that you're also interested in them.
That reminds me, or it kind of takes me back to my younger days. I used to dance, and that was something that I absolutely loved until it became a career for me at one point. And then I was good at it, but I didn't like it in the end. And
Yeah.
then that's when I was like, okay, cool. This isn't for me anymore. Let me go and do something else and utilize everything I've learned from it. So I think that's a really good point that you've made there.
And I'd say that especially for people that maybe earlier in their careers, like I'd say take risks, right? Because the price of a turn, a price of trying something out in the earlier in your career is so much less than later, right? You've invested less by definition because it's earlier of your time, of your mind share into something. You also probably will have less responsibilities and less things you have to worry about earlier in the career. So that's the time to really explore and make sure you don't get into this trap of like, yeah, you're good at it and you kind of fell into it. And then, 20 years later, you ask yourself, like, what happened here? And that
Yeah.
gives you an opportunity to explore so many. I ask people this question a lot, like the people that I admire, people that I think, made it by like my criteria. And oftentimes they wind up doing something and loving it, something that wasn't what they set out to do. And, they graduated college and they thought they were going to do one thing and they turned out to be doing and thriving in something completely different. So I'd say that like taking risks, being bold, like that's the time.
Yeah, I agree. And did you always want to work in the technology space, or is that something that you kind of fell into?
Both. I think that in a way, I fell into that, but I fell into that really early on. I studied computer science when I went to college, and at the risk of dating myself, that was a really interesting time. It was like the beginning of the e-commerce. It was beginning of a lot of things. I actually noticed a lot of similarities now, like industries go through these inflection curves. And I find lots of similarities where things get the old is almost becomes irrelevant, and there's the semi-irrelevant to some degree. You need to know your history, but it gets redefined and you have to start employing new tactics. And when you're at the beginning of something, you get to shape it. You get to become part of the story. You get to really influence it and create impact. And so that was the part that I found most exciting. I love transformation. I love being at the beginning of things. And when I see that they are, it's something different and something new. And like that really piques my curiosity and kind of wants me to like say, hey, if I open this door, what's going to happen? Or if I open this door, what's going to happen? And that was like an incredible time that made for a very fulfilling career. And I see a lot of it now too, right? And people, you read some different industry reports and whatnot, and a lot of people are concerned and worried, and they say, hey, we're going to transform the way we work, and things are unnerving and unsettling. But I look at it as a great thing. It means that we get to shape what happens next. We get to set it in a certain trajectory, and we get to be part of something new and exciting.
It's probably quite nice. Obviously, I'm in the technology world, but I don't actually get involved in half of it. And I can only just use a computer, but it's ever changing. Technology is ever changing. So, like you say, you're always learning something new. There's always AI or something exciting that's going on that you can actually, I suppose, refresh your skill set on. And it's not just you're doing the same thing over and over again. So I can imagine that's probably kept you entertained for a little while now.
Yeah, I think entertain is a good word. Yeah, it's both like it keeps you fresh and on your toes a lot of times, but definitely entertained.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And going back into yourself and where you are now as a leader of a global business, what legacy do you want to leave behind in terms of, your leadership, your culture, or impact on the organization and people you've worked with?
I'd say two things. One is going back to, leaving something in better shape than it was. Uh, I love to see every organization that I've been part of and, I've left and I transitioned. When I see certain things being in better shape or, a new course being charted like that, I find that heartwarming. And then the other part is the most important part is growing the next set of leaders. And for me, when I see again, like being in the field for a while, seeing people that I've worked with taking these, like having great careers and taking all these really exciting opportunities and being able to make real impact, I think that's the most gratifying thing. And I really look at leadership sort of like as an enzyme, right? You want to set off these new processes. You want to be catalyst of things. And when I see that, when I get to witness other people's careers and other people's progression, like I'd say this is the best feeling.
I definitely agree. I think that's something that, I've only been in, I suppose, my leadership journey as of recent, but it's something that is the main thing I love about, managing people and leading people is just seeing them flourish. Yeah, it's warming to the heart is what I'd call it.
Yes.
With yourself in the leadership position, how can you support or what would you suggest for other leaders to do to bring more women up into the leadership roles?
Great question. I'm glad you asked. I feel like our responsibilities as leaders is to create opportunities. And it's up to others to grab them, and it's up to others to be able to make the best out of them. But our responsibility is to find those opportunities and to create them and give feedback, kind of like turn and help people, especially in the beginning, to navigate, to launch. What I've noticed sometimes, like the bad example of it is even when opportunities would be created, people would be put in it. And on the face of it, seemed great. It's a promotion, it's a new look at this person, they got promoted. But when they weren't set up for success, then they would not do as well. And then people would, jump on the fact and that they didn't do as well and talk about the failure and what have you. And oftentimes it created two things. It didn't allow them to flourish in that role, right? But the other one, which I think is a far more damaging one, is it would make those people gun shy. And it would do the opposite, right? When we talk about being bold, when we talk about confidence, when we talk about getting this inner sense that you belong, it would chip away at it. And so I think that as leaders, the really important thing to do is to create opportunities, but also help people, nudge them along. Sometimes they won't take it because they're afraid of failure, right? And so being able to create this safe space to fail. Obviously, you don't want to tell somebody, hey, take this role. It's okay if you fail. It's not okay if you fail, right? But it's okay if you fail at some small things so that you can grow and so that you can course correct. It can't be big and career limiting failures. And you as a leader should give the people that you're pushing into these roles just enough stretch so it's not too easy for them, because if it's too easy, they're not going to stretch. They're not going to develop these new muscles. But you shouldn't just throw them in the deep end of the ocean, because then it can create a career limiting failure. It can create all of these things that we just talked about. So in a nutshell, it's finding opportunities and then safely pushing them into that and guiding them along the way to a certain point, because then at some point they launch and they should thrive on their own. And I don't see that done enough. There are books in it. There are people, talking about the leadership session or, different people management sessions. But in practice, I honestly don't see that done enough. And whether we just get too busy as leaders or whatever else happens that gets in the way, that is the piece that I wish, like I try to do it myself. And I wish for every leader out there to do that more to help nurture new talent.
I like that. And what would you say? You've mentioned a few good things there, but are there any other key things that you'd say that would help set someone up for success? Is there anything that you've done to really push someone forward and you've seen the impact?
One of the things, when it's possible, I'm always on the lookout for opportunities that would be a good match for a person's skill set and personality. And it's not always possible, obviously. But when I see those, I try to grab them for that person and cultivate them and help the person. That's really becomes the kind of when we talk about what you like and what you're good at, it launches them, gives them a lot of momentum in being able to succeed early on. That's not always possible. And then you just, I try to talk to people about the muscles that they want to develop and kind of see for them also to take a more active role in maybe working on the areas that when that door opens, they will be in a great shape, to walk through it. And so you have to be prepared, right? When that opportunity comes along, you want to make sure that you're a great candidate for it. And so I try to talk to people about like, what do they want to see? And actually, when you ask this question of what they want to do, and which door they want to walk through and why, you get a lot of people are stumped because they generally think that they want to be promoted, but they don't always necessarily have the chance to think about, okay, so what do I want to do outside of being promoted, right? And what is the role that I want to have, and what is the impact I want to make, and what are the qualities that I feel I already have versus something I need to work on proactively. So when that opportunity comes along, I'm a good candidate for it.
I agree. I think if you can think about those things and not just, oh, I'd like a promotion and a lovely pay rise, which we all do, but what is it that I'm looking to do? Actually, you might find that particular promotion might not be the one that you want to go for because actually you want to do something else instead. And I think you start to realize what you actually want in life.
And that's an important question, and it's a hard question. And I always advise people to like really truly answer it for themselves, write it on a piece of paper. Sometimes you just be really intellectually honest, and you'll be surprised by how often what you think you want is actually not what you truly, truly want. It just maybe sounds, good on paper, or it has some attributes that excite you. But if you think about, once you're going to get it, you're going to have to like live with it, right? And be successful at it. So oftentimes, if anything, this helps folks articulate what they want better. Sometimes it actually changes their mind about what is it that they want truly. And then once you articulate it, it helps to see like what are the attributes of success in this position, and then what you feel you have, what you feel you still need to get. And then, the ones that you still need to get, if you start early, by the time something like that comes along, you're prepared, you're ready for it, like you'll jump and you'll win.
Yeah, exactly. And talking more about your journey and your background, how did you, balance, I suppose, your work life and your personal life as you were coming up through the ranks? What did you do to, I suppose, maybe have boundaries or, yeah, set yourself up for success?
Very poorly. I'm like, if anything, I'm a cautionary tale. I don't think when I was younger, I balanced it well by any means, any stretch of imagination. But what I've learned along the way with my own scars to show is it's really important. It's not the hours you spend doing something, it's the quality. And if you're, if you're thinking you are in your like personal time portion of whatever you're trying to balance, but you're really constantly thinking about work and you're distracted, you're not really there. And if you think you're resting, but you are actually, your mind goes 100 miles a minute thinking about your day at work, you're not really there. And so the one thing that I'd say I do differently, and then I'm better for it, is being much more present for whatever it is that I do. That's probably one of the hardest things I've learned along the way that I find really impactful nowadays. And at some point I read somewhere, I was like, well, you really, if the purpose of like focus and the ultimate focus, if you're washing the dishes, you're just washing the dishes. You have to focus on just washing the dishes. So here I am over my sink. I'm like, I'm gonna crush it. I'm gonna be the best at it. And I'm washing the dishes, like, this is ridiculous. I want to do this and I want to do that. And I think about all these different things. And then I realize how difficult it is to truly, truly focus. If you're washing the dishes, just wash the dishes. And this is exaggerating a little bit, but really trying to become as, if you practice this, you'll learn it's actually harder than you think. Being really present at whatever it is you do. Two things happened for me. One, once I became more present and like less distracted, some of the things I was present for, I realized I don't want to do that. I do not want to be present for it. I don't want to be anywhere near it. And so that also helped me kind of be more deliberate about the different aspects of my life and like different activities. And the other ones, I just get more out of it. And even if I have less time doing it, I'm fully doing it and I'm much better for it. Whether that the same thing applies to work, right? If you're just kind of sitting there, you're technically there, but you're not really fully focused on it. You're distracted. You're doing something else. You might be putting in really long hours, but you're not getting insights and you're most likely not delivering all of the impact that you otherwise could deliver.
Yeah. And you can probably get tasks done quicker. You know, if you're focusing on washing the dishes, if you're just doing
Yeah.
that, you can probably get it done a lot quicker. So it goes the same way when you're talking about work as well. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Being present in the moment is really hard though. It's something that I don't think anyone can really master, but give it your all and try and see what happens.
I gotta tell you, I haven't mastered it at all. But if I look at it like by comparison, I've made progress for myself. And you notice interesting things, and especially in leadership, people are not really lauded for how many hours they work or how many, how hard they work. It's all about the impact. And when the more present you are, the less distracted you are, the higher the chances that you're going to come up with some sort of an insight or something that is like you'll be able to see the crux of the problem better. You'll be able to make a better decision. And that's what really counts.
Yeah, definitely. And something else I wanted to talk to you about today. You're on the board for a company called Oasis Girls. I just wanted to find out a little bit more about that and what your ambition is with that business.
I am so excited about this organization. So I just joined the board this year. And so Oasis for Girls, the mission of the organization is helping teenage girls from different disadvantaged backgrounds to really gain the skills and the confidence to build strong futures. And, when a lot of the things that we've talked about today, right? Like you do need to have the skills, you do need to have the confidence, you do need to have psychological safety. And I find and this is the moment where we can make the most impact on somebody's, or maybe not, even if not the most, but really significant impact on somebody's future and the trajectory of their future. And as somebody who came to the US as a teenager, I have a firsthand experience with how important it is. Like being a teenager is rough, and it's there's so many changes that happens to you mentally, physically, and if you add to it the stress and uncertainty of maybe being of a certain background or not having all the advantages in life, the helping hand, whether that's an organization or a person that really helps with the skills, helps with advice and counsel, it can create an amazing impact and really set somebody up for success in the future. So that's one of those like really impactful moments. So I am very excited about the organization. Is doing great things, and I just can't, wait to see like all of the other things that we're going to be able to do.
I love that. I really love the cause. I love the mission. And I totally agree. I think when you have someone that can help guide you, especially in those kind of teenage years, going up and trying to figure out your life and your career, don't get me wrong. Like, you're not necessarily going to be like, hi, what job do I have? And they tell you exactly what job, but they can at least guide you into the right, I suppose, the right path. And I was very lucky when I was younger. I always had I say role models that I looked up to when I was going from a teenager into being a young adult. And I think it changed a lot when I moved into the corporate world. that's why I now get coaches. But beforehand, it was always like, okay, let me gravitate to someone who I would love to be like. And when I was dancing, it was like my dance teachers, and it really benefited me, and then they helped me on the right track. So I think this is awesome. I think it's such an amazing thing that you're doing. Now, I have a tradition on this podcast, which is my closing question for everyone is always, what is one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
That's such a good question. I would say be bold, take risks and explore. And like, this is the time. And, when something feels hard, it's okay. You think you're going to fail at it. It's fine. It's like, this is the time to do it. And I'd say be bold. It's the biggest thing that I would say. If I were like to come back and see my younger self, I would definitely be like, I would shake me by the shoulders and say like, don't be afraid of things, be bold.
Just go do it. And like you said earlier, crisis creates opportunity, or failure creates opportunity. So what's the worst that's going to happen, right?
Exactly.
Lovely. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time today. It's been great to get to know you even more. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here.